Hi guys, so this last video is on slope. This is a preview for Friday's lesson. So slope, what is it? Slope is the measure of steepness of a line. And what does that mean? If I say a line is really steep, think of a hill. It would be really hard to go up the hill because it's a higher slope. A hill that's easy looks like this. It's not so steep. That has a lower slope. All right, and there are two ways we can find slope. We can find slope on a graph by doing rise over run. Or we can do the change in the y values divided by the change in the x values. And they're going to give us the same answer. But when we have just a table and we don't have a graph anymore, we want to focus more on number 2, which is the change in y divided by the change in x. So you're going to notice as we do this that slope is the same as the unit rate. Only when the unit rate, remember, means in the quantity of 1. And we're going to see an example when we can't get to that quantity of 1. So it's just called the slope. It's not called the unit rate. So this is only when it is in the quantity of 1. All right, so let's take a look at this graph. So this graph has 3 points, okay? And first I'm going to practice by doing the rise over run, and we've talked about this a little bit. All right, so I'm figuring out how many units am I going from one point to the other. So if I'm focusing on these two, to go from 3 to 5, I'm doing 1 unit, 2 unit, so that's 2 tickets. And then I'm rising how many units? Let's see. I'm starting at 45 and I'm going to 75. So that is 15 here and 15 more. That's 30 units, which in this case is dollars. So for this example, we have $30 divided by 2. And that gets us $15 per ticket. Now that is the same as the unit rate because it is in the quantity of 1. So if I look at this first point, 115, that is the unit rate. For 1 ticket, it costs $15, and I can read that right off the graph. Now, change in y and change in x is when it's not so obvious what I'm counting by, right? So if I make this a table, actually that's not going to be enough space, so let me do this down here. All right, so if I take these points and I put it in a table, and I have 3, 45, and 5, 75, and say I can't figure out how much it's jumping by because I can't do mental math in my head that well. So what I can do is I can figure out the change, and change in math means subtraction. So I can take these two numbers, and I'm going to go from the biggest to the smallest. So I'm going to go from bottom to top here. And I'm going to do 75, take away 45. And what does that get me? That gets me 30. So that's my change in the y values. Then on this side, I'm going to do bigger, take away smaller. So 5 minus 3. And that gets me 2. That is my change in the x. So again, this was my change in y, and that little triangle just means change. And this is my change in x. So I get the same thing, $15 per ticket. Okay, so that's just the 2 different ways to go about finding slope. All right, let's try these 2 examples. All right, what is slope of the line? So again, I'm going to pick 2 points. I see a nice point here on an axis and a nice point here. I'm going to practice this one using my change in y over the change in x, just so we can see that in practice again. All right, so let's list the points. This point is 1, 3, and this point is 2, 6. All right, so I'm going to find my change in y first. 6 take away 3. That equals 3. And what am I talking about here? I'm talking about money, because y is money. And x, 2 take away 1, that gives me 1. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about pounds. So when I divide that, I get 3. But what does that represent? It represents $3 per 1 pound of grapes. Okay, good. All right, last question. Let's find the slope of this one. And they're giving us 2 points for us to use. All right, now I'm going to do this at the bottom, and we'll put our answer up at the top. All right, so let's make our table. 3, 5, 6, 10. And I'm going to do my change in y. So 10 take away 5. Change in y means, like, how am I getting from one point to the other? How many spaces am I using? How many units am I using? And in this case, we're talking about feet. So 10 take away 5 is 5 feet. That's my change in y. Divided by my change in x, which equals 3. And here we're talking about centimeters. Now, if I try to divide 5 divided by 3, that's not going to work. I mean, it works, but I'm going to get a really crazy decimal, which is called an irrational number, and I don't want that in this case. It's nicer if I leave it like this fraction. It's easier for me to read than 1.66666667 repeating. That's too much. So we're going to leave the slope in our answer as 5 feet per 3 centimeters. And what does that mean? It means for every 5 feet, the model will be 3 centimeters. All right, and that was the bell, so I need to go teach. I want you to answer these 2 essential questions on your own. The answers to them are on this page, so please make sure you're reading the top of the page to get those answers. See ya.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sorry.